How am I right now? Am I okay?
You're fine.
Okay.
Yeah, you could use a little hair color. Get rid of the gray. Get rid of the gray.
I mean,
I'm embracing mine.
well, what do you think I'm doing?
What happened? You weren't that gray last time I saw you.
What?
Yes. It's like overnight you've gone gray.
Have I really?
Yes.
You've gone more gray in the last couple months.
I think he's added a conditioner.
I mean,
He's made it
I
shiny.
guess Katie was gone this week. It was kind of a stressful week, so.
Cats. Oh.
All right.
No, it's fine. You're embracing it. You look good. Don't worry about it. Bill's just hating on you.
Hating?
Mr.
No,
White-
I love
Mr.
his
White
hair.
Yeah.
All right.
He's hating your youthful
on.
virility. Careful.
Bill's got the silver fox thing going.
Well, silver
Linda's
anyway.
like, you don't help him at all. Don't.
The Danger's his middle name, for crying out loud.
That's right.
Welcome, sentient beings from all known universes and beyond. It's time to activate your cranial downlinks and prepare to receive a raft of discussion on a cosmic ocean of science fiction and fantasy topics, interviews with local area genre devotees, and insightful prognostication by our soothsayers of science fiction, our forecasters of fantasy, and any other beings that happen to get caught in our gravity well. This is the Galactic Driftwood Podcast.
Well, hello, and welcome to another episode of the Galactic Driftwood Podcast. I'm Bill.
I'm Seth.
Go ahead.
I'm Stu.
I'm Jenna.
I'm Charles.
And this is our special pre-Halloween edition of the show, and we have a special treat tonight. We have our friend Stu Burns back with us to talk about vampire lore and a new book that Stu's working on. You want to tell us a little bit about that, Stu?
Well, the name of the book that I've been tossing around is History Bites.
That's
Nice.
great.
Yes. And what I'm working with, because there's so many, well, as Jenna was talking about before we went live, there are so many books that are just sort of compendiums all about the vampire from hither to yon.
Mm-hmm.
And on the other hand, there's also a lot of little monographic studies of this little population doing this and this little population doing
Mm-hmm.
that. And what I'm trying to do is go through very specific portions of history where vampire lore intersects with what's going on in historical context.
Ooh.
So it started. I worked on a PhD at the University of Illinois for a while and ended up bailing because the career prospects weren't looking good. And then, frankly, I just got behind. I'm kind of a bum. Bill,
I would know nothing about that.
As you know,
Jenna feels personally attacked.
I was getting a PhD in history. I was at the dissertation phase. Job prospects were terrible, and now I work for the railroad. So
you and me both. Where were you work on yours?
Jenna's in this picture.
Southern
and she doesn't
Methodist
like
University.
Yeah. You know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I still know people who don't have tenure.
I still know people who haven't even gotten a tenure track gig. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just bop around the country.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah, academia is in bad shape right now, and it's probably.
Is it
worse.
because what do you suppose is the cause of that? Are there too many people out there looking for work, or is...
It's not because tuition's too low.
Yeah, there are a lot of things. I think a lot of it is honestly just a cultural, the differences in cultural appreciation. There was a time when we said we are going to build this city on the hill. We're going to follow this Enlightenment ideal. We're going to do all this research, and now you have a lot of. I hate to get too political in a podcast like this, but you have a lot of people who say that. Well, the academy, that academia is bad. They're just poisoning kids, and it's they're building up their own ivory tower, and we're not going to give them any more money than we need to get people out with degrees.
And
so
honestly,
you have a lot of e-education and a lot of alternative ways of instructing rather than people with tenured faculty doing research.
Yeah.
Sorry,
No. I'm sorry. The thing is when it seems just like an intersection of a lot of unfortunate situations because when I was an undergrad. Between 2003 and 2007, they said you're getting into it in a great time. A lot of people are going to be retiring. There's going to be so many job opportunities. It's going to be great. Yeah. Well, they didn't take into account that a lot of the people who are in history or the humanities love their jobs. so they wouldn't retire, and then
Can't retire.
retire, and then you had the economic crisis of 2008, 2009, where then all of a sudden universities started cutting jobs or not replacing people who did retire, or they took away the tenure job track, and they never replaced them because now you have online universities. So it's just like it was just an intersection of unfortunate. Oh yeah, Seth is building those online education programs.
I don't know what you're talking about, Jenna. I'm not part of the problem. You're part of the problem.
But for our audience, we digress.
Right.
But tell us, where'd you
That's
end up and how you kept driving?
I don't know. That's not much of a digression because it really is. It's really a change in culture. I mean, there was a time when you could get, if you made it through the PhD, you could probably land someplace. And now, boy, as we said, I know people who did everything right, had National Endowment for the Humanities grants, were Fulbright scholars, the whole 9 yards, and never did really work in their job producing detailed studies of very specialized fields. But what I ended up landing was I came back to Omaha and
Let me ask real quick,
Yes,
though, what was it, anthropology or what was
History.
the history? Oh,
history also. Yep. Although if I had to do it all over again, I would have gone to the folklore department at Indiana University.
Okay.
But then I probably really wouldn't have gotten a job. So there you go. But I landed back here and ended up doing statistics for a small insurance company here in Omaha. And so I landed on my feet, and now I have the wherewithal to just kind of poke around on my own. So that's a lot of fun.
No, in statistics, I think what's really good about that, because that was my for a PhD in history, you have to learn other languages. And because I was doing American history, they allowed statistics to be my second language, because being able to read data and to interpret and critically review data is a language in its own right. So you don't just accept the information, you look at all the other factors impacting those
And I
numbers.
can see where that'd be very important from a historical perspective,
Yes.
being able to
Looking at
analyze the data.
census, looking at other studies, things like that.
Sure.
So that's a good eye to go into this with.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
So you've been doing this research, and what have you been finding?
Oh, well, I hate
Or
to,
should we wait for the book?
Well, I hate to be like say like Bruce Lee, where you don't start with a conclusion, but I did in a lot of ways start with conclusions because there are previous studies that had been done, but when you look at them closer, you can see there are things that, because you're asking about history versus anthropology, because most of the people who are doing this are coming from an anthropological standpoint, and when you look at things from a more historical perspective, you see you guys are missing something. What my dissertation would have been, and what's actually now going to be the first chapter of my book, is the episode in which you're probably familiar with in 1732 in Serbia, which leads to the word vampire coming into the English language. There's this vampire. I'm putting in air quotes for those of you listening on the podcast. Vampire named Arnold Paul, who is dug up by the locals, said, "Oh, this guy looks like a vampire because he's gained weight since we put him in there. He's
Racists.
got blood around his." Goodness gracious!
He looks like a vampire. Is that one of those?
Well, for crying out loud, dude's been dead for 40 days. They didn't expect him to see much down there at all.
And he's gained weight, and he's got blood around his lips. And
Yep, the whole 9 yards. And when we staked him, he groaned. Well, how much more proof do you need, for crying out loud?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, which are these are all very telltale signs that you want to see from forensic pathology, and that's where most historians go as far as they do. Try and interpret this in a folk context, in a physical context, but in a historical context, they kept throwing a word around in all these accounts of the people that they would subsequently dig up on the same hunt, because they ended up digging up like 16 people.
Oh, jeez.
And most of them were either Hajdukes or the spouses or family members of Hajdukes. They were in the Hajduk band social class. And most of the anthropologists weren't really attaching any significance to that term, saying, well, it's just a kind of soldier, whatever.
Yeah.
A Hajduk was a bandit. It was someone usually who had left the family, been driven out for economic or other means, and went up into the mountains and would take out people, periodically, and that's how they lived. Most of their opponents, most people they took out were Turks, the people who were ruling Serbia. You know, sort of this foreign yoke, this Muslim over Orthodox Christian.
When you say take out like assassin type thing?
Either assassinate or just usually just
Murder?
Just rob.
Oh,
Yeah.
Rob, okay.
High women, just taking the
Gotcha.
money.
I'm guessing
Okay.
these are like second and third sons. You probably have no property prospects too.
Could be. Well, and this is in a vassalage system where the property is actually owned technically by the Turks themselves. So people were they weren't serf would be the wrong term in this system because they had more rights than that, more going on, but there's not a lot of rights in the first place.
So
really.
that makes sense.
Yes, either folks, either second or third sons or just folks who got in a little bit of trouble and off they went. So or folks who maybe had been Janissaries and washed out, and so off they went, and so they end up being there's really big castes of them.
Wow.
So
And the common people, not to interrupt you, Seth, but just to finish this thought, the common people usually view these folks as their defenders against the Turks. Like, well, these are the best things we've got going. Is these are the only ones who are really fighting the Turks because they're robbing them and harassing them, and they're our source of resistance.
Yes.
Then Turkey goes to war, or the Ottoman Empire, I should say, goes to war against the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and the Austro-Hungarian Empire wins and takes that part of Serbia in 1718. And they're a lot worse than the Turks were. They want people to convert to Catholicism. They evacuate Belgrade, trying to make Belgrade into a Catholic German city. Again, they really push conversion. They're really intruding on people's lives. The Turks, if you know about the Ottoman Empire, it's very hands off.
Okay.
Just keep doing what you're doing, pay your taxes, pony up a kid or two to the Devshirme to go be seriously to go end up as be indoctrinated by be civil servants.
That's what happened to Dracula and his brother.
Well, yeah. Well, now they were captives.
More
For-
ransom.
Yeah, for political reasons, like saying we're going to hold your kids over here to make sure that you don't attack us.
Right.
And then you went back. Someone in the Devshirme who became a Janissary, they never went back. They joined the. They
Went to some war or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And so who do the Germans, who do the Austrians put in charge? Well, they say, well, the Turks have been fighting these bandits, these Haiduks have been Haiduci, if you want to use the Serbian conjugation, have been fighting the Turks all these years. We'll put them in charge. They'll be our civil servants. Well, now if you're Joe Serb average, we'll shoot. You've lost the only resistance you have. You've completely lost.
Yeah.
Right, because now they're part of the
Now they're part of the
government, essentially.
So they're like almost worse than Quislings. Really.
Gotcha.
Because people really feel utterly
Abandoned,
hopeless.
yeah.
And so how can they fight back? Well, this is one way to fight back.
Desecrating their graves.
Desecrating their graves.
Huh.
And that's not really been looked at very closely, and so that's chapter 1.
Nice.
Okay,
Wow.
so I personally know what Janissaries and Quislings are, but I'm guessing that some people in the audience don't.
Oh, I'm sorry. A Janissary was someone who was someone from a native population, like from Serbia or Romania or what have you, who was essentially drafted by the Turks at a very young age. Someone who was identified at like the age of 11 or 12, saying this kid has potential. They take him off to Constantinople and they train them and indoctrinate them. They convert to Islam and they become part of their elite fighting corps. Or some of these kids also end up going into the civil service, and that's where the Grand Viziers come from, who actually are administering the territories.
Okay.
So they're kind of co-opted. It's one of those things. You're going to lose a few of your kids. And if you've read Dracula, that actually is alluded to briefly there.
Well, I mean, just like the history, not just the book that Bram Stoker wrote, but the history of that system. So there's a lot of craziness that we tend to overlook or think, oh, that's just literature. No, there are some real messed up things that were done to hold large territories of land, whether it be the Ottoman Empire or the Roman Empire, or
the Skolmans, and all that. So you want to use the word Janissary. That was the system that we were looking at previously. And what was the other word that I?
Oh,
Quisling.
Quisling.
Yeah.
You want to go on that one, Seth?
No, you're.
Oh,
I
somebody
definitely know what it is, but you can.
Vidkun Quisling, was he president or prime minister of Norway?
Oh, probably president.
President of Norway, who Hitler decides to invade, and Quisling says, "And I welcome our cockroach overlords, whatever
Yeah.
the line from
Yeah.
The Simpsons is.
Right.
Oh wow.
Jen is just so happy right now. He's like,
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Right.
So it sounds like there's been for you like a really interesting seeing that intersection of folklore and history, because the human mind can change things into a lot of. I think of the movie The Exorcism of Emily Rose. I don't know if you've all seen that.
I have not seen
They
that.
did a very good job. It's based on a true supposed possession account in the 1970s, I want to say.
Okay.
But the way they filmed it, she could either truly be possessed, or it's just epilepsy. It's some sort of mental disorder. She ends up dying.
Oh, really?
She accidentally dies from the exorcism that the priest and the parents were trying
That's
to
a
do.
horrible, horrible movie. And I should warn people
Horrible in what way? You mean badly?
because that's the movie where they wake people up. Isn't that the movie where they wake people up at 3:33 in the morning?
I don't know. There's been like 333 is a common number
Yeah.
that they like to.
So that was I think that's the movie I walked out of. No, at the
Because
end, and
that-
I walked out going, "This is the dumbest movie." I know it was true. Yeah, I think.
Because then there's paranormal activity. There's a lot of.
No, I
movies
think
that-
it was Emily. It was the.
I've heard people with similar opinions to yours.
Yeah. Well, no. The problem is, I walked out of that movie and I went, "This is the dumbest." Went to my friends, right? I'm like, "Thank you for making me see this stupid movie." And for the next 6 months, I woke up at 3:33 in the morning.
well, that's you're obviously
That's the one.
possessed.
That's the one that
Obviously.
it got in me somewhere, somehow.
Yeah.
But
So
these events happen, and you're trying to cope with it in
So this is
whatever
all
way you
based
can.
on a true story. This
Yes.
movie. Okay.
I mean, it. You know, sorry.
So it's based on a true story, but I think it's just an example of what Stu is talking about, the situations where you have the story of what they say they're doing, but there's likely other stuff in science, and they're just trying to interpret this event in their own time.
Yeah, other
Yeah.
stuff in science, and that these when events like this play out, that we tend to think of as like, as being just part of this small group.
Right.
There may be actually much greater context to them, because as I've been looking at this, I've been looking at other things. There are these anthropologists who did these studies in Mexico of vampire folklore of the 1960s, which they posited a creature called the Tlahuelpuchi, which would victimize children. You know, people would wake up and their babies would be dead, and there'd be marks on their throat, and they'd be, "Oh my goodness, the vampires
Yeah.
has killed my baby." As these anthropologists looked at this stuff, and in conjunction with local social workers and medical professionals, they said, "What's happening is this is the pre-industrial phenomenon of people who would go to sleep for a few hours, and they wake up in the middle of the night, maybe have a few drinks and visit neighbors, and then go to bed and finish sleeping." And women were nursing their babies after this second sleep, before the second sleep, and they were rolling over and they were smothering them.
Oh.
And it was just tragic, and so you were able to blame this Tlahuelpuchi
Yeah.
as your killer. Here's the coda though. 22 years later, 1982, they come back. By this time, the region is thoroughly modernized, as relatively speaking, but
Yeah.
thoroughly modernized, and this phenomenon has utterly ceased to exist.
Okay.
And so yet again, it's just these larger processes.
So
of
did
history.
So the problem ceased to exist, but was it because of change in behavior of the people that were smothering the babies, or?
Yes.
Okay.
You know, just medical professionals getting out to the rural areas saying, "Okay, what you're doing here, don't do this." I mean,
Yeah.
which has been a change from the time that I was a child. I look at my poor grandmother when we were cleaning out her home said, "Oh no, be sure to hold on to that playpen, you know, because the kids brought up with that." Well, that playpen's a death trap.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
I mean, I survived it. You know, if you think about
Yeah.
how
Right.
what the technology was like when I was a baby, what a car seat looked like in 1970 when I was born.
There were
Sure.
car seats in 1970.
Yeah, it was sharp. There was all these edges on it. I cut myself in the thing. I have a scar on my belly from cutting myself on this car seat.
Yeah.
They were
Made out of good steel.
Good Detroit steel.
not unlike the swords we have on the wall here. Exactly. Yeah,
We
it's-
had, when I was a kid
Yes.
growing up, we had the station wagons we had, the
Sure.
seats all had metal trim on the back.
Mhm.
So if you hit the brakes, you'd fall forward and cut your head open on the back of the seat.
Sure.
And yeah, I mean, sharp edges everywhere and
Well, when I was a
no
kid,
seat belts.
when
Yeah.
I was a kid, the best place to be on a long car trip was up in the back of the
Back in
window.
the station wagon, yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, if there would have been an accident. I don't know what would have happened, but
Oh yeah, we
it
did.
would have been good
You'd
for
have
me.
been Superman for a few seconds.
My
as you flew through the
my
jungle.
family took 10 people to and from Ravenna, Nebraska to Overton, Nebraska in a station wagon. 'Cause we had 3 in the front, 3 in the middle, and then we had 4 kids piled in the hatch in the back, just
Yeah,
kind
Having
of
a
rattling
great
around
time.
back there.
right.
Yeah, no,
Right.
that's even I like. We had a Jeep Grand Cherokee when I was a kid. We did a long road trip to Colorado. They basically threw blankets and pillows and gave me some pile of books, and it was a playpen.
Right,
So-
right.
And we liked it.
That's right. And those of us that survived are tougher for it.
Yeah,
We turned out just fine.
just fine. I mean, I may have had a few traumatic brain injuries, but it's fine. It's fine.
Yeah, but it's a process of modernization where the phenomenon ends up going away, and
No.
that's Mexico.
So as you're finding these historical events, and people might have just read them before, like, oh, they said they have a vampire. It probably wasn't really a vampire, but it's fun to.
Probably
what if
wasn't a vampire.
What if it was? But as you're like digging into the history, and you're able to more clearly find the reality, does it kind of ruin some of the magic for you, for the lore?
I think magic got trashed a long time ago. Really. It actually makes it more magical when you
go back.
when you realize that it's not just the people to whom it's happening.
Mm-hmm.
That it's part of a broader process. You want to get really cosmic. How Sagan said that we are the universe expressing itself, and vampire folklore or episodes of vampire folklore, or vampire folk practice of hunting vampires, or of experiencing these phenomena, are part of these societies expressing themselves in certain ways. You look at British East Africa in the 1920s. There are all these rumors that the King of England is having to have Africans kidnapped and have their blood taken because they need our blood for medicines. And so you have these firemen running around and wearing bright red because that signifies the blood. They're working for the Brits, and they're keeping Africans in the cellars of the fire stations
Oh my god.
to drain our blood and take it to England. And you have riots. You have people lined up, who gather outside of police stations. I keep saying police. Of fire stations, saying, free them. We know they're in there. Not unlike Pizzagate a couple of years ago.
I was about
Right.
to bring up something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And people saying there's no one in the cellar. We swear there's no one in the cellar. But but this is utterly believed, and it's because of colonial relations. These are people who are being exploited, for crying out loud. You have practical slavery. If you're in Kenya in the 1920s, you have to wear this locket around your neck with your fingerprints and your employment contract.
Jesus.
Huh.
It's just awful. These are folks who didn't really trade in money before, so they said, well, now we'll tax you. Now you have to have money, so now you have to have an employment contract.
Huh.
So you have effective slavery all the way into the 20th century, sanctioned by the British Empire. And these are and you do end up having organized opposition, but you also have this. It also gets out in other ways, and these are folk expressions of that same opposition, of people saying, these stinking British, who we know we hate for some reason, they're also taking our blood. That is just not that far-fetched.
Yes.
Now, you had mentioned 1960s, I think, was the most recent vampirism story that you told. But are there still, even in our modern day right now, are there still cultures that believe in vampires and that?
That story that I just told about Kenya,
Yeah.
something very similar to that happened in Malawi just a few years ago. By that point, the villains had changed to Saudi Arabia. And the science was actually pretty standard, saying that there was a blood shortage in Saudi Arabia, and they're taking Malawians captive to supply the Saudis with blood transfusions. It was the same story, it just been transplanted over time. Now that's more of a sublimated thing. That's no longer a supernatural affair.
Yeah, that doesn't seem unreasonable.
Well, I mean,
it doesn't.
most of these stories don't seem unreasonable to the population as they're happening. Because
Yeah.
I would argue honestly Because look at the Arnold Paul stories in the 1730s. Like, what do you want us to do for evidence? We dug the guy up. This is messed up.
Sure.
This person does not look like a dead guy, for crying out loud.
Right.
And you had doctors there
Yeah.
taking this down, publishing the reports in 1732, who said the same thing. Like, yeah, they're really onto something here because of the nature of their understanding. I would argue that, and now I'm going to throw this because this is going to be in topics near and dear to your hearts, that there is more empirical reason to believe in vampires in the 1730s than there would be to believe in UFOs in
Sure.
in the
Yeah.
1950s.
Because the amount of data that they took and observations from the way that they understood it in their time.
Yeah, they believe they had actual evidence, whereas
And
people just had anecdotal stories or.
and you'd also have the people who'd be like, "Yes, I am a vampire."
Right.
That's a lot later.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah, because the thing with vampires in folklore, usually they're very shadowy figures. They don't have, you rarely have much of a personality.
They're horrific. Like, they're not
Well,
attractive. They're not desirable.
I was thinking more like like full-on crazy people.
Oh.
Well, again, that comes later.
Oh,
That comes much later. Yeah, in real folk practice, when people really believe in vampires, you don't see them. That's why they operate at night. When we're all asleep, that's when they're up doing their thing, because you don't see them.
And now it's crazy because you have these studies. I don't know. Have you heard of ambrosia or some of these young blood transfusion studies?
Heard of them.
So that being for the audience who doesn't know, so there's been some mice studies that have shown that if you basically connect the circulatory system of an old mouse to a young mouse, the old mouse actually starts
Regressing.
becoming better, like their cell
Sure.
renew more effectively. They basically become young again.
Right.
And there was a company in 2016 that was a startup that said they were going to offer young plasma, young blood to
Old
people to be transfused to help be younger and things like that. One of them was going to come to Omaha.
mm-hmm.
And it's
I
like,
remember that.
yeah, and so now the FDA's put that on kibosh because they're like, we still don't know. It seems all coincidental.
Yeah.
But you could very easily, if that is like somehow scientifically verified, or even if there's just people who believe it, they're going to find young people
Right.
and basically groom them. You don't smoke, you don't drink, you do whatever, and take
Yeah,
blood.
it's very much rich person to be. I don't know if this will work,
But
but
I'm going to give it a good college try.
But I am going to take all of your blood just in case. Just
Right.
in case.
Or, I mean, because with the black market already does this with some animals still. Rhino horn. Bear gallbladder can go for $40,000.
Excuse
Hey.
me, I'm going to go.
Hey, you know what the
onto
big
bear?
Because it doesn't do any good, but there's some Asian medicines that
Yeah.
say they can. And actually, they're in the Pacific Northwest. They don't let you open the bear the cavity because they don't want to tempt people to try and just go kill bears for their gallbladders.
You know what the big thing now is? Mammoth tusks. Huge trade coming up in mammoth tusks because of all the thawing in Siberia. These things are being exposed because there's the countryside is starting to liquefy and it's sliding off in a lot of areas. It's revealing these huge fields. They said, I think it was in 2017, people made an estimated $63 million selling mammoth tusks to China and other areas of Asia. And they said it's a huge gold rush now in Siberia.
What's it supposed to do?
Well, it's like an aphrodisiac. It does all kinds of different medicinal things.
How
There's-
would you figure that? Like,
I don't
where
know.
would that even come from?
Because
But it's the ivory like the elephants.
Yeah, but
You know what that's reminding me of?
Big and hard.
I was going to say that. That's what I was going to say.
Boys and girls.
No, it's scientific way associate like lion's mane. Supposedly, like now they are finding studies, but originally what made people even try lion's mane for the brain was because it looks like a brain.
I somewhere I'd heard a lot of it. I mean, I'm sure there's people that believe it, but I think even in China, a lot of it is a prestige thing.
Yeah.
They're pretend they're serving it at their orgy parties and stuff.
But
It's a
vampirism is fear of power, and this desire to consume, that humans will consume, that things will come and eat you in the night, and you have to be vigilant. And it's funny because you look at modern power structures and they're not that far wrong. There's always there are already always forces coming to consume.
And I guess, like, just think about how prevalent light is in our modern society. Just like imagine everything without street lights at night or any lights. The dark would be a lot scarier.
Linda, can you go to camera 4 there? So this was the article. I was in the Washington Post on the radical warming in Siberia, leaving millions on unstable ground because a lot of these areas of Siberia, as they warm, there's these huge pockets of methane that form underneath.
The permafrost?
Yes, and it sometimes will explode and create big craters. Other times it's shifting the land, and there's they said there's huge amounts of infrastructure there, apartment buildings and homes and
Alaska's
stuff
going through the
that
same
are
thing.
shifting, and they're becoming unstable and having to be evacuated. The people can't live there anymore because of fear of collapse because the ground is shifting so much.
But yeah, it's like it's funny, it's hard to, it's a matter of control. Like, I think, if I have this rhino horn or this mammoth tusk, I can control something that I cannot seem to get ahead of.
Right.
You know what this is reminding me of? The mammoth tusk phenomena? Is the trade in Egyptian mummies
Yes.
Oh, right.
in the 19th century.
Right.
They're grind up for dyes for
Elixir,
pigments.
or, yeah.
You'd have mummy unwrapping parties, right?
Yes.
Which sounds like an awful party game, but
Right there with mammoth tusks.
I've never been that rich that I need to enjoy those kind of things, so...
Maybe there's just a switch that, like, you hit a certain level of wealth, and then boop.
I don't just need a yacht. I need a yacht that has a smaller yacht inside of that yacht.
With its very own mummy, yes.
Yes.
If I really wish to invoke a ghost into my mansion, we can get to a culture more antique than ours. Yes. Let's
Yeah.
go to ancient Egypt.
It'll be lovely for that party in New Year's.
Someone fetch me a young teenager. I desire to use all of his blood.
But I mean, we're laughing, but it's basically a form of vampirism. If this company had gotten off the ground.
That is a question.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
like, these people back when that were digging up the graves to check for vampires, were they doing it on their own, or were they doing it because the rich guy on the hill
Well,
was paying them?
more on their own. Yeah, this is very much a bottom up phenomenon. That's really one of the key differences between vampires and witches. This is throughout at least European history. I should say Euro-American history. That witch trials have official sanction. That's from top down. That's going to happen. Vampire hunts, whenever a higher power gets a hold of this, they say cut it out. Stephen Dujan, the first Tsar of Serbia, in 1349 rather, comes out with the first law code he has specifically a clause saying don't quit digging up dead bodies, quit exhuming dead bodies. This is one of the first things he declares illegal. Anytime the church or any higher authorities ever encountered vampires, they say shut that down. This is the basis of superstitions, and that's really when the vampire craze hits in the 1730s. That's really how witch trials finally end up being utterly outlawed, as they have to crack down on the vampire hunts because this is getting ridiculous. People are digging up cemeteries, in Austria, in France. It's moving west, and so they explicitly outlaw that. And while we're at it, they outlaw the witch trials as well. And that's how it finally gets utterly shut down. Is you realize, my God, just how stupid and silly this is. But it's almost always a populist phenomenon. Because are you familiar with the New England vampire hunts?
Which ones?
in Rhode Island.
Okay, yes.
Yeah, in the 19th century, when someone would have tuberculosis, and tuberculosis would tend to run in families where, like, one family member would get it, they'd weaken over a period of years, and at the time and when they die, then someone else would start.
Yes.
And the folk remedy for this was to find, it was relatively rare, but it kept happening.
Right.
Was find the last person who died, exhume them, and say, I bet they're pulling the next person to the grave, and there was blood in the heart, well, then you'd burn the heart and you'd make a soda out of it, make a tonic out of it, and give it to the person who was still alive, and hopefully that would cure their tuberculosis.
Yeah.
Like, you have to wonder if this is a form of community placebo.
Yes.
Well, sounds
Like-
like,
I think that's exactly
Because, like,
well, that sounds like an early vaccination.
an attempt.
An attempt.
Yeah.
But-
That doesn't.
It's
It's gross, but it doesn't.
I don't-
That's one I could see.
But if, like,
you
if
burn
there's
the heart,
illness or
though.
there's people dying,
No,
I mean, they say the human mind's a powerful thing, and if you go out and you kill the vampires, and now everyone feels like, okay, we're going to get better now, and they actually do get better by coincidence, the community placebo has worked, and now they maintain the practice.
Reinforces
Yes,
the-
yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah,
Science?
placebo, and let's face it, you've got to do something.
Something.
Whether it works or not is one thing, but you've got to try something, because these are desperate people.
Better to
who are
take
losing.
action and be wrong than to take no action and
Right.
be
let
wrong
things continue.
anyway.
And
yeah.
let's look at some of the treatments for tuberculosis. Where at the time people were getting steam enemas
Ah,
for tuberculosis. I mean, it was
I drink the ash soda. I would drink the ash soda.
The
I
thought of
just-
the steam enema really burns my butt.
I think people who
Ladies and gentlemen, he'll be here all week.
I think people who live in a first world country or maybe in secure circumstances, they don't understand the level of powerlessness humans have had to deal with for most of its existence.
Right.
Like, they're safe. Like, you have the power to go see a doctor. You have the power to go get food that's secure. You have the power to have a roof over your head because you have a home and apartment.
Right.
Everything is basically secure. And I think when you go out and you realize you may not have a doctor, you may not have food, you may not have all these things, the level of powerlessness makes doing something all the more strong, the desirable.
Yeah, I mean, there's not much that eats us anymore,
And the bears.
other than bears. But you've got to go out to the bears,
You have to go out of your
Or
way
cannibals.
to get eaten by a bear. Yeah.
and in
And
which
cancer.
case the cannibals come to you. So
and cancer.
Can't.
Oh, yeah.
And think of all the snake oil there is around cancer.
yeah,
Yeah.
That's the only person I knew personally who I've ever blocked on Facebook was someone who was trying to post stuff about this black tar cure for cancer. I'm like, no, don't even go there. Do
Right.
not even go there.
No, especially after that young mother died because she went to some naturalist guru. She had breast cancer, and he said, "Oh, you can get rid of it naturally," and she died. Has a 2-year-old
well,
baby.
I mean, there's
common.
a lot of stuff like that. I mean, our superstitions aren't monsters anymore. It's fake science almost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's the old. What is it? Red Skeleton. The old joke about every fruit cocktail adds 2 days to your life, and every cigarette subtracts 1. So something
Oh,
like that. So if you
You
have
do that weird math.
yeah, if you do 2 fruit cocktails for every cigarette, something like that, then you'll live forever.
Ah,
Yeah. My favorite quote is, you know what they call alternative, well, shit, man, I just lost it.
what they call alternative medicine that
That
works?
They call it
Medicine.
Medicine, right. Right.
But I mean, but that's not to take away too. There are some natural remedies for a lot of things, but it's
But
But
but they've
That's
been
medicine.
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
but like
if you take antibiotics and you get diarrhea because it's killed all the healthy bacteria in your gut, you know what the cure is for that? A cup of yogurt.
Yeah.
That sounds like a folk remedy, but that's what your doctor says. Eat some yogurt.
But I mean,
That's what you do.
like aspirin came from bark, so like
Mold on bark. Something
no, I
like
think
that.
it was something. It was I can't remember the exact
Willow.
tree.
Willow.
Willow, yeah,
Yeah.
willow bark.
Yeah, that's
Had
the
the-
old folk remedy was chew willow bark and it'll relieve your headache.
Because it
Why
had
did they call
the
it Willen instead of aspirin?
There actually is some history to that. Because
But-
Bayer put a lot of research into naming its products. That's how you get heroin.
Ah.
It's because it's heroic in its ability to kill pain, and
Ah.
they're like,
Ah.
well, it's heroic in some other aspects. Also.
Yeah,
Well,
right. Right. Huh.
like scorched earth heroic, maybe.
Yeah.
All right, so I guess. What else do we want to talk about with vampires? I want to talk.
I was going to ask him, what has surprised you in your research? Or is there anything that's like
Honestly,
made you really excited, or some new folklore that you've come across? Like, I have never heard this, and this is actually would make a great movie.
It all does at some point. What surprises you most, surprises and excites me most as an author, honestly, is stuff that people kind of ignore, or almost willfully ignore. A colleague of mine, he's coming out with his new book, so we'll see if he addresses it. And I'm a little hesitant to even really mention this in public, so I won't.
Okay.
Okay. I'm going to keep that to myself. But yeah, a lot of it is the stuff that people don't bring in and don't connect with art. Basically, my thesis of my book, that they have a hard time connecting larger movements to what's going on. They want to keep it at the folk level. It's like, well, this is people's natural reaction to this and that. Like, yeah, but they're also reacting to their historical circumstances. That's a bit of a surprise. Let's see what else. When you were talking about the people who say, like, yes, I am a vampire, boy, that's a modern thing. Because you are not. If you said that in the 1730s,
you would have been killed.
Boom, right there. You were gone. That's a terrible thing to say. You don't get that until you get people who just don't believe in him anymore.
Right.
And you don't get real vampire fiction until you get to a culture that just doesn't believe in it anymore.
Because then you have no fear of death, because people are probably not going to kill you for claiming it. They're just going to think you're a psycho.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. So after Anne Rice, when Anne Rice in 1976 comes out with Interview with a Vampire, where you have these, still bad guys, but intentionally sympathetic, very
sexy vampires.
Yeah, very sexy, very consciously beautiful. I mean, that's part of her entire aesthetic. Is these vampires are beautiful. That's when people see people saying, "Well, okay, now I want to pursue this. I want to do this thing."
Sure.
One thing that modern authors bring in is this idea of immortality. A vampire, traditionally, wasn't really immortal. They existed after death, but they exist after death so you can go kill it.
Yes.
I mean, it's meant. Arnold Paul exists so we can have some way to react against this sickness that's hitting our community. We can go kill a vampire.
And the thing is, too, it was obvious that these were vampires. They weren't attractive in any way. They were gaunt creatures. And like you said, once they became beautiful, that's when the story changed.
Through fiction. Yeah.
So I mean, we all know about Dracula, but I guess what was the first fiction then that made them something other than the ugly, horrible monsters, the beautiful monster?
I get to tell this story? Oh, right. And there are very few times when you can say, boy, you can just draw a line. This is one of those times, boys and girls. You're familiar with the story about how Frankenstein was written.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, when Percy Shelley and his young wife Mary, the daughter of one of the greatest women's rights advocates of the late 18th century, along with Lord Byron, his personal physician, go up into this resort around Geneva in the year out of summer, and it's pretty miserable, so they don't get to go out and do all the outdoor stuff they'd like to do, and so they end up holed up in this chateau, and they start reading this pulp fiction magazine, this phantasmagory book with all these lurid ghost stories. They have a ghost story writing contest, and they all get started in their stories. Well, Mary gets started in something that ends up becoming Frankenstein, ends up becoming one of the seminal novels of the 19th century. And Byron starts a vampire story. Doesn't get real far on it. And Polidori writes this strange little thing, starts it. And none of them really finish him up there. Mary finishes hers later. Polidori and Lord Byron, a little bit later, have a falling out. Polidori being the personal physician of Lord Byron. And Polidori says, what's the best way I can get back at this guy? I know. And he writes a short story, widely anthologized, you can find this anywhere, called The Vampire, with a Y.
Yes.
With a character called Lord Ruthven, which is a name that another of Byron's former paramours had used for Lord Byron.
Oh.
About this innocent young man who takes up with this character named Lord Ruthven, and they go off to Greece, and Lord Ruthven is killed in Greece as Byron was eventually himself, fighting for Greek freedom. But he says, if I die, lay me out on during the cycle of the full moon.
Okay.
But swear to me you won't tell anyone what happens here. He says, oh, I swear. And so he does that, and sure enough, bam, he's up again. He's like, okay, we got a problem here. But then this fellow wants to marry Aubrey's cousin,
Ooh.
I believe, but he can't tell anyone because he's sworn not to tell anyone. And he realizes what this person is, and he can't stop them. He can't stop until they are finally married. Then he says, "No, I have to tell her." And by the time he gets to the bridal chamber, it's too late, and his cousin's blood has sated the lust of a vampire.
Oh
That's
gosh.
the last line of the story. And that's your first merging of this idea where the vampire is this suave, debonair, sexy individual. It's Lord Byron.
Huh.
Probably the sexiest
Yeah.
person you could have possibly have.
Imitated
Yeah.
in that time
Oh, yeah.
because he was well known. Wow, that's very cool.
Now,
You
is
didn't know
there,
that one?
No, I didn't.
Oh,
I didn't know
really?
that connection. No,
Oh,
I
yeah.
had not heard that at all.
That's awesome, possum.
now, are there any folklore stories that are particularly horrific,
Oh, geez.
more than the vampire?
Oh, more than the vampire.
Yeah.
Oh God, there's some. Oh my goodness. I think a lot of the, even like the 19th and 20th century, like Lover's Lane stories about the
Killer.
about the killer on Lover's Lane and so forth.
The town that feared night.
The town that dreaded sundown.
Yeah.
Well, that's not a folk story. That really happened.
Well, yeah, but that's kind
Was
of
that like
that's
a
kind of
mass
the
murder kind of thing?
Yeah, well, that's the root of that Lover's Lane serial killer.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, the classic story, gosh, of the radio. They're out making on this Lover's Lane, and there's a radio's on the radio. They say the hook-handed killer is escaped from the asylum, and he hunts youngsters, and they're making out in cars, and the girlfriend says, "Honey, you need to go." And he's like, "No, that's a bunch of credit. That's a bunch of credit." And finally, she convinces him. He says, "Okay." Turns the key, and he pulls out of there. When he goes to let
Or
her
is
out
it
like
'cause
a
he's
gentleman,
mad?
here's the hook
On the
hanging on the
Door
on the
handle. Yeah.
Or the other similar one where the boyfriend, kind of same scenario. He hears something outside, and gets out of the car, and she's scared and locks the doors and hears like
a tap
something tap on the roof of the car, and she won't open it up and she won't check. And then in the morning when she finally does get out of the car, he's hanging above her nose, his foot tapping on the
Yeah.
Mhm.
Swinging and hitting the roof of the car. As,
yeah.
he
There-
swings on the rope.
Those are. There was a great documentary on Netflix, and it was like, I think it was called Urban Legends, but it was about all the urban legends that
Oh,
led
yeah.
to like Black Christmas, the killers inside the house, and
Ah.
the issue with the clowns.
Mm-hmm.
All those mythologies.
Oh yeah, Katie was watching that. I remember that. That was a pretty fun show.
Yeah, the Schwartz book series that was marketed more toward middle school kids, which I think makes a good read for anyone. The Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark.
Yes.
Yeah, like over 2/3 of those are well-known urban legends. That's great reading.
Yeah.
honestly.
Oh, it is, and what was really cool is it also included the music. Like there was some notes pages, so if you played an instrument, you could play some of the folk songs.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's cool.
If if you will be the next to die, stuff like that. I mean, like, because the Victorians were morbid.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think all of humanity had a pretty morbid culture, but I think because they were so close to us in terms of timeline, they were supposed to be progressive, this whole new world of technology and everything like that, but they're still clinging to these folkish ideas.
Right. Now, are you big into horror movies?
Oh, I have been.
Have you
I've been
watched
known to be.
It at all?
No, I have the clown movie. No,
Yeah.
I'm afraid I have not. I'm sorry.
Okay. Anybody else seen It?
I may have hurt Aaron jumping in the theater for the last chapter.
You may have hurt him or hurt him.
Hurt him accidentally, because, like,
Grabbed onto him so hard.
Yes. It was really well done, the storyline
Yeah,
and the
I liked it.
mythology. Because the mythology that Stephen King puts around, it crosses several books in different storylines. They don't even talk to each other, but it's like the same universe.
Oh,
Mhm.
okay.
And that's what's interesting. It is a force of nature in a way. It's some creature from an alternate dimension.
Yeah.
And there's, they can't get too deep into it in the movie, but it's terrifying. And that's I love a good mythology, and that's why I never get anything done in October, because even though a lot of horror movies are kind of lame special effects wise, I love the mythology that they'll create for the different horror movies and monster movies and ghost stories.
Now, is King working like the same vein as Lovecraft or something like that? Is that?
Yes, he's actually been compared to Lovecraft because you have one force that's represented by a turtle that's a creating force, and then there's an alternate dark force that destroys and is chaos, and it comes from that. So, and just happens to be here in this little town of Derry, and it's like things happen there every 27 years, and it kind of gets into more of the book that it purposely influences the minds of the adults so that they don't see. It's like, oh, a child is missing. They care for about 5 minutes, and then it's like a dulling of, just kind of goes away.
Yeah.
The worry. It's like.
And even the
sounds like a nice place to live, actually.
Even the kids
Sounds
that were
relaxing.
involved in the first one that defeated it, then they went on to leave town and go live their own lives. As horrific as an experience as they all had doing that, it all left them, and they forgot completely
They forgot
about
each
it.
other.
And they forgot each other. And there was only one kid that chose to stay in town rather than pursue his interests, because he wanted to make sure this thing never came back. And, of course, in the second movie, things start happening again. And so they had all sworn that if this ever happened again, they would come back. And so he calls them and reminds them about their promise and says it's happening again. And so they still don't really believe it, and they don't really remember why they promised or what this is all about. So they do all end up coming back. But yeah, it's really well done. I thought it was really good.
I'm
part
ready
two.
for the director's cut though, because I think there's probably a lot more. There's a lot more mythology that have been brought in and things like that.
No, I'm just thinking. So modern times, rather than like other than cancer remedies, that kind of, are there things that you've recognized that people are still being superstitious about? That's still pop culture, but not just movie pop culture.
What aren't they being superstitious about
Right.
anymore? Honestly, I mean, I have people on my newsfeed who are ostensibly reasonably intelligent folks with some accomplishment who, even if they don't believe the world is flat, they think it's an interesting thing to think about.
Yeah.
I'm like, no, it's not. I mean,
Right.
how you used your GPS to get here?
But satellites are a myth.
And, yeah.
The moon emits its own cold light. Didn't you know?
I'll give you a cold light.
Well,
Or-
and
Being
people
threatened
believe
by
in
a ghost.
astrology or tarot reading or
Well,
Horoscopes.
Religion.
UFOs, people have called those our modern elves and pixies. Creatures
Yeah.
that come and take you and maybe bring you back. I mean, it's trying to explain the world in a way that
So
you
what-
understand.
What needs to happen in our society right now to make vampires more popular than zombies?
Are you tired of the zombies? Are you tired of them?
I'm
Need a
just
Because Twilight kind of did that for a while.
yeah, that was
Jenna's
a bad
got a
one.
bad taste
That
in
was
I
her
do
a
mouth
have a
bad
right
bad
now.
taste in my mouth.
No, I actually
it's the
I do have
glitter.
to
It's
say
the
I
glitter, isn't
prefer
it?
I prefer evil to be seductive
Well, evil generally
rather
is
than
seductive.
just something that crawls out of the ground and is gross and stupid.
2 words. Space vampires.
Yeah, no, I've seen space vampires.
Well,
Yeah, life,
Yeah, I
life force, that's a seductive one right there.
Power of the dark side.
Well,
yeah, exactly.
I mean,
I want to be seduced for the trouble.
Of being murdered.
Well, and just to answer your question, they do tend to ebb and flow. I've actually seen some people put a political spin on that, and when certain political ideologies hold sway, that vampires are more popular, and when other ideologies hold sway, it swings back to zombies, which I'm not sure there's much to that. But the honest to goodness answer to your question, which does go back to Twilight, unfortunately, is the creator has to happen. Someone creates a story that just
It's compelling, that resonates.
Yeah, that catches people's imagination. I mean, if you want good, like Gandhi said, be the change you want to see in this world. I'm not sure he meant vampires.
Seth, get on that.
Create the vampires you want to see in this world.
Yeah.
But, like, speaking of the vampires we want to see in this world, who's seen What We Do in the Shadows?
Yes.
I've seen the movie.
I have not seen the movie. I'm waiting to start the series until I see the movie.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah,
It's
I
so
know.
much fun.
I gotta
Highly
watch.
recommend our
Well,
audience.
you're the one that told me to see the movie first.
Yeah. But you should have seen the movie by now.
I know.
We were talking about
I
vampires
know,
today.
I know. Well, listen.
Does it suck you in, Seth?
Yes, it does.
Listen, I've
So-
been watching Glitch.
All right.
Yeah. Have you seen? Are you on Netflix?
Yeah.
Have you watched Glitch yet?
I have not. I need to. I don't even know
Oh,
what it
it's pretty good. It's a new series that's made in Australia, and when it starts, you maybe think it's another zombie story, but it's not, because it starts with people pulling themselves out of their graves. It turns out to be 6 or 7 people that are pulled out of their graves, but they're not brain-lusting zombies. They're normal. I mean, they're
Possible
perfectly,
spoiler alert.
yeah, they're
Oh,
perfect, they're perfecly
This
normal.
show is all spoilers all the time.
Yeah, and the policeman that goes there, because he gets a report of a disturbance at the cemetery, so he goes there and he sees all these people naked, covered in dirt and muck, sitting around these.
In other words, at my house Thursday.
Yeah, right. Disturbed graves. Well, he thinks it's like a hazing thing, or they're on drugs or something like that. So he, gives them blankets and takes them to the local physician to have them checked out. And she said, well, they're perfectly normal, and it comes to find out eventually that one of the people that have risen from the grave happens to be his wife, who died 2 years ago of cancer. Okay. And that's when suddenly the realization hits him that, wait a second.
I better call my girlfriend back at the house and tell her she should get out.
right. Because he's, of course, remarried, and he married the best friend of his wife, and she's now 9 months pregnant.
So,
And so, so there's a lot.
so no
lot
matter
to unpack.
no matter where this show goes, his relationship is screwed up.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And the other thing that's interesting about it is, so there's this shadowy pharmaceutical company in town that we believe has some impact, although we don't know for sure yet, but we believe there's something going on there. And then the other interesting thing is that these people that have come back from the grave, one of them, they try to take him to go find his brother who's still living. And his brother's outside of town.
Are you giving spoilers?
Yes.
Boy, is he.
All over.
Yeah.
Well, this is how Bill functions. That's
Yes.
okay. He just,
Sci-fi.
the whole story,
Yeah.
scene
So
by scene.
they're trying to, and the dead person gets so far to the edge of town, and all of a sudden starts bleeding out of his eyes and nose and ears and stuff like that. And so they find out if they leave, they're
Which in
Not
a way
gonna
is
make it.
almost a draw on the vampire myth, because in
Right,
some of
that's the
them,
first thing I thought
you
of.
had to stay in the ground of your birth, of your
Right.
birthplace to continue to survive. That's why Dracula transported all of the earth from, and Bram Stoker's Dracula transported all of the earth from into the abbey,
right.
the dirt of his homeland.
Yeah,
From
Guillermo del
Transylvania.
Toro's series. What was that called? Guillermo del Toro did a vampire series.
Kronos?
Really?
He did Kronos. I'm not sure he did a vampire. A series?
Trilogy, yeah.
Oh, I haven't heard of this, but I know of Kronos too.
Yeah, let
That's
me
a good movie.
look it up
Yeah.
really quick. But
Anything he does is fantastic.
in that series, it's kind of a vampire apocalypse story, and the vampires are super creepy and not sexy.
Take your word for it. Who here has seen Let the Right One In?
Yes.
Ooh, yeah.
Both versions, both the original and the American
Original's
version.
better.
Yeah.
When you see this the scene where she comes in without being invited,
Uh-huh.
and then she starts bleeding. That's what you remember. That's what you
Yeah.
remember that. I like. Of course, I love that movie. It's interesting watching that film from a perspective like mine, who's watched a lot of vampire fiction
And read a lot of lore.
read a lot of lore, more the fiction that and you see it never ever really gets. You never get the movie that you really want, that really brings in everything you wanted to.
Yeah.
And until I saw Let the Right One In, I was like, boy, this thing checked off all the boxes, but it's still an amazing. It's not derivative at all, though. It uses things. It's like T.S. Eliot said. Mature poets imitate. Immature poets imitate. Mature poets just steal. What he meant was when you steal something, it means you make it so your own that you don't recognize the source material anymore.
Wow.
And that's the way that Let the Right One In was for me. It did everything I wanted the movie to do, but it didn't seem like it wasn't self-conscious about it. It was making this incredible story about it. And the movie comes to the end, and I'm ready to just jump out of my seat like, yes, this is it. With my arms start to go up, and I look around, and everybody else in the theater is just staring straight ahead, the 1,000-yard stare of like,
what did we just watch?
God, and I'm like, dude, you might not want to celebrate too much right now. These guys might turn on you real quick.
So, I think something that you guys might enjoy. It's called The Strain, and it's the story is, I think it's a joint effort by Guillermo del Toro and another Jim Kent. No. This is on my list, Jim. I haven't seen it yet.
It's called The Strain?
The Strain.
Okay.
It's a trilogy of books, but there's also a series, and it looks like it's streaming on Hulu. But the vampires in it are very different. Definitely not sexy vampires, and it's vampires by way of Guillermo del Toro.
Yeah.
So, awful monsters, and there's a little bit of the supernatural to it, but it's also kind of like a virus / a parasite that completely will transform a human host, and it's super creepy.
Nice. No, I'm gonna check that out.
Yeah,
the series is pretty good. I've seen, I think, at least the first 2 seasons, but I mean, it brings in folklore and still does something different and new with vampires, because what you were talking about with the vampires having to be buried in their native earth, that plays into it in kind of some surprising ways, and yeah, it's really good.
So when you get close to finishing, or when you do finally finish the book, we'll have you back on to promote it, obviously. When are you hoping to... You're letting it speak to you and do its own thing?
I'm just trying to overcome my latent laziness and get stuff done.
I mean, author high five?
What's been moving me forward really for a long time is just doing these, what would be chapters in the book as papers academic conferences.
Oh, wow.
And just kind of moving, getting it together that way. And unfortunately, that can become its own distraction.
Yes.
Good work can become its own distraction that way. Getting off of me for a second, though, what I like about 3 things we kind of have going on the table now with what we do in the shadows, and Let the Right One In, and The Strain, is this idea, and I think it speaks to what is the essence of our geek culture, at least in a horror context, is we already know all this stuff. We've seen, if you look at what we do in the shadows, if you've seen Nosferatu, if you've seen Bram Stoker's Dracula, if you've seen any number of other vampire films, or pieces of literature, and Let the Right One In, if you've seen, lists off the same bunch of stuff.
Yes.
The Strain lists off the same bunch of stuff. You have such a more meta appreciation of what's being done there, because it's this whole idea of this intertextuality of everything you're bringing to the movie is very relevant to it.
Right.
And I mean, pure originality is a beautiful thing. Sometimes it's a completely new idea, and you're like, wow, isn't that great? But there is such a value in saying, okay, I know what my audience already knows.
Yeah.
I'm going to take that and I'm going to play with
Build
it.
on it.
I'm going to build on it, and I'm going to mess with them a little bit.
Yeah,
Really.
right.
Like, oh my gosh, like what we do in the shadows is just masterful. It's just absolutely, I'm not going to be a spoiler as Bill often is, but most of the film is just silly because it's set up very much like, and this isn't spoilering much because this is something you get in the first 10 minutes. It's basically the early reality shows. What was that first? What was that first one?
Kind of set up like
The Real World?
Yeah. It was the Real World.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, on MTV, except with vampires, because they have these the apartment meetings, the flat meetings, and talk about stuff, and amongst the undead people, and so it's just silly on its face. But then you have this foreboding presence of something serious that's actually going to happen later in the as the film progresses, and then they just pop that bubble like the Hindenburg. It's just beautiful. It's just a gorgeous, gorgeous.
Peter's 8,000 years old. He's not coming to a flat meeting.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Well, we're at our time here, so definitely want to thank you, Stu, for coming on and
Thank you
joining
so
us again
much.
for another episode. We're looking forward to your book coming out. Should be
I'm looking
interesting
forward to getting
reading.
now. You're making me get the darn thing done. So.
Yeah. Bring you back. Feature
Right,
it. Book
right.
release.
Excuse
No
me.
dying.
So, yeah.
With
So-
that, not unless he comes back.
Right. What if they came back?
Depends on the type of vampire he comes back as.
Bill
I mean,
would definitely be an energy vampire, just like telling puns and absorbing the. And he'd just be like,
The groans.
It makes me
Makes me
happy.
happy."
Healthy.
Yeah.
I hate to say that could be a heck of a short story. That would be awesome. An energy vampire who exists on the groans of bad puns.
That would be awesome.
like there needs to be more energy vampire short stories about corporate America too. I think.
Yeah.
In the Dresden Files, they have energy vampires, and they each feed off a different type of emotion. And Jim Butcher said that there is a type of energy vampire that feeds off of laughter, so they become some of them become comedians.
Well, yeah, that's in I can never remember the name, of course, but yeah, there's a popular series where there's a vampires who feed off of erotic energy, very much so. Yeah.
Oh yes, the Anita Blake series.
Anita Blake, thank you very much.
Have you?
I've
there was-
shut that out of my mind.
I'm not going to remember. I'm not
Yeah.
going to the name
So
of the
bad.
book right.
Yeah.
I remember years, just a decade ago, reading it was something like Vampires in the Lemon Grove.
Yeah. I've got the
Remember
book.
that?
I haven't read it yet, but I have that book. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was. I didn't finish it, but I remember there was an interesting take that they get. Basically, they figure out they can eat lemons instead of blood.
And it sustains them the same way.
Yeah. Well, now the question is, what are you going to do with your life?
Because you don't have to suck blood anymore.
You know, one of them. Yeah. So that's.
But can they go out in the sun too then?
I think they could.
Kind of like the Suki Stackhouse
Yeah.
series, where you have these. Okay, now the
True
vampires.
blood.
Yeah, then now you have a way to sustain yourself without killing people, but it's kind of disgusting. Nobody really likes to do it.
Right.
You know, do you go all the way? Do you reform or?
It's fun killing people though in that series for most of the vampires.
Yeah.
And a lot of the people should be killed in that series.
Yeah, but it's I don't know. It's one of those interesting dark things that it's an escape. So I don't think it's going anywhere anytime soon.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you all for joining us. We've got some exciting episodes coming up. We're going to be going to NebCon in November.
Yes.
We've got our friend Benito Garcia coming back to talk about his RPG gaming business
D&D, yeah.
thing that he's starting. So lots of fun stuff coming up. So, Sean, Seth.
You goddamn did it again!
Oh God.
Bill?
I blame John.
It's John's
Was-
fault.
was
if
that-
he
There's a
hadn't
whole
started it
thing
and
where
reinforced
Bill
it,
keeps calling
Was
Seth
that
Sean,
an
and
actual
it's an
accident that
that
time?
was an accident that time. That was
damn
an
it.
accident.
And on that inside joke note,
Yes.
Ugh.
have a good one, folks.
All right, we'll
Alright.
see you all later. Tune in next
Thanks.
time. See if I
Bye.
can remember Seth's name.
You mean Sean?
Right.
Linda!
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Galactic Driftwood podcast. For more information and past episodes, please visit our website at galacticdriftwood.space or subscribe to us on YouTube. And now, please deactivate your cranial downlinks, collect your towels, and be sure to watch your step as you exit our gravity well.